Hi folks, it's Emma Grant here from Heartfelt Change. Welcome to anyone who's listening live on Facebook. Welcome to anyone who's catching this on replay or picking up on the video section of my website, and a particularly big welcome to those listeners on Oban FM. You can hear this show on Tuesdays at 2:45, and there's lots of other great shows on the radio as well. There's a lassie who's doing mental health musings on a Sunday, if I've got that right. Anyway, you can check the schedule for that. So my name's Emma Grant. If you don't know who I am, then let me just introduce myself. I work for my company's Heartfelt Change, and I work with people to inspire them to access greater joy in their lives, to lead a calmer life, and to sort of come to terms with your life as it is. And that's where this topic that I'm dealing with in this series of your attitudes is really key to the work that I do with people, checking what your attitudes are. So if you're joining live, then it would be lovely to get a wee note in the chat. Let me know who's there. A wee hello, a wee wave. Let me know who you are and where you're listening from or watching on. If you're listening on Oban FM, you can imagine me smiling at you, and perhaps you could smile back, and I'll feel that over the airwaves. Okay, so let's dive in. So this thing of attitudes, I suppose, what your attitudes are is really important to me, because it's what you have choice over, isn't it? What attitude you bring to something is something that you can absolutely have a choice over. So, whatever your deck of cards is that you've been dealt, you can choose, and that may be out of your control, particularly as a kid or into your teens, whatever. The deck of cards that you're dealt is possibly out of your control, but you have a choice as you're getting into your adult years as to the attitude that you're gonna hold towards your childhood, towards your life now, what's going on for you now. So I suppose that's why the whole question of attitudes really interests me, because I think it's a really sort of defining character for people. And what I don't mean by that, I don't just mean like put a polish on everything. Was it turn the frown upside down? That can just be really annoying. But also that actually, I would say that if you're purely just kind of mechanically making every negative into a positive, then I would say you're not really dealing with your underlying attitudes. You're just using a veneer of positivity to sort of try and show the world that you're a cheery, happy person with whatever attitudes you've got. So the issue that we're going to particularly look at today, we looked at it last week, but I'm going to look at it again, because I've actually been sitting in meditations that are pondering this whole thing to get rid of resentments. That's the thing that we were looking at, and that really caused me to pause and contemplate, but contemplate in meditation, not contemplate in things going round and round in my head. So we're sticking with resentment for today, so I hope no one feels resentful about that, and hoping that they were going to get a new topic today. So with resentments, in advertising for this live, I talked about resentment as being like sugar. It's kind of sweet as you say it or feel it or moan about it, whatever the resentment is, but it doesn't actually do your health much good. I would say it actually causes acid in your stomach, and it causes you to grumble and mumble over things. and to hold on to past angers. Well, that's the definition of resentment, isn't it? So, but why am I calling it sweet though? The reason I'm saying that is it feeds identifications that you have with your personality. I would say that it gives you almost like a sugar high of feeling righteous if you really embrace your resentment. You can really get into it, can't you? And, I know this not from any moral high ground. I know this because, this is what I've done in the past. If anything here is making sense or is resonating, then do drop a wee line in the chat. We're going to come back to that thought of it being sugar and sort of actually being tasting like sugar but actually having a sort of acidic reaction. Just to hold that thought for now. When I was talking about attitudes in general, you're as much hooked into whatever story you're telling yourself if all you're doing is putting that veneer of positive attitude onto it. So for me, when I, growing up with my childhood as it was, I was very much the one who coped. I was strong. I was the one who fixed things. I was not going to be the one that broke. I was going to be in charge, and I was didn't need anyone to I was going to be okay. I was going to do things by myself. Now, on the one hand, save my bacon on a number of occasions. There was lots of times when I was growing up where me and my brother were left in quite challenging circumstances. If I hadn't had that attitude, then I possibly would have crumbled and fallen by the wayside. So that attitude kind of served me well. But the flip of that attitude is a kind of underlying sadness or an underlying identification with sort of not being seen, with my efforts not being acknowledged. And to counteract that sense of not being cared for, I flipped it into, well, stuff you everyone, I'm going to do it myself. So just hold that thought, and think about how this might resonate for you as well. This discussion about how to get rid of resentments, and it may feel like I'm jumping around here, but I'm chucking out these notions, and I want you to kind of hold them all like a juggler. We're just going to touch back in on what I mentioned earlier about the discussion that started off after last week about how to get rid of resentments. So one very, very good friend of mine, who actually, he was sort of key to my kind of the start of my journey on any kind of spiritual path or on any kind of awareness of myself. If Louis catching this, he'll know. Well, he knows who he is. So he was putting that thing in the chat last week about how he writes down his resentments because that's how he knows them. That's how he knows that they're there, and then he literally burns them, I think was his thing. As a technique, that's something, I mean, goodness, I've done that with my kids, like, when they were wee, they'd wake up with nightmares, whatever, and I get them to, we'd sit in front of the fire and they would draw whatever monsters it is they'd seen, and we would burn it. And it's a very, very strong way of dealing or releasing something. With resentments, however, I would say that in order to be able to write it down and to burn it and have that as being the release mechanism, there's a couple of things there. I would say, one, you need to have a really great clarity on what that resentment is. And I think this is where my pal Louis is really strong. He has great clarity over things. So for him, this works really well. And it may well work well for others. You need to have great clarity over what your resentments are. But the other thing that you need is you actually need all of you needs to be ready to get rid of it. Why am I saying that? So this is where it tastes like sugar, but it's actually acid, right? Feeding these resentments is actually like this little, it's a little slow drip. It feeds our sense of self-righteousness. Like I said, it feeds our sense of, somehow being morally superior to others, or having been, like grieving on the fact that you've somehow been wrong. This feeds us in some way. It feeds our sense of ourselves somehow. The writing down and the burning requires clarity over what to write down, but then in the act of burning, in that sort of the symbolisis of getting rid of something, you actually need to absolutely also be buying into wanting to get rid of it. So I was sitting pondering this during the week, having looked at Louis' comments and been sort of going into contemplation with this. I was thinking, well, for me, the first thing I need to do is notice that my resentments are there. And sometimes noticing that they're there it's not as easy as it sounds. So for me, there's always a bit of a balance between holding boundaries and sort of being angry in the moment, rightfully angry in the moment. If someone takes the piss over something, or someone annoys you, then you can be rightfully angry, you can be rightfully sad, but it's whether you are holding on to that, feeding it, and like sipping that little taste of sugar every 5 minutes to feel justified in whatever action that you're then taking. So for me, in this last week, I kind of go in and out of and I notice this about myself, was the resentment that I can most easily slip into at the moment is with the kid's dad. So we've split up how long ago? 5 years, 6 years, a chunk of time. But we've still got young kids, so we're interacting a lot still over the kids every week, sometimes every day, over bits and pieces that are happening. For me, there's always a boundary. I struggle sometimes to set sort of healthy boundaries between sort of holding my own and holding a sense of fairness, holding the kids as being the most important thing in that relationship still, but not being taken the piss off within that as well. And I'm not even saying that my ex is setting out to take the mickey. It's just it's my own perception of it, isn't it? So a couple of weeks ago now, I can't quite remember. Anyway, so I felt this anger, this point of anger seeped into resentment. And what it was about we tend to do the kids like back and forth over the weekends. And it was coming up to the end of the holidays. I'd had the kids that week, so in my head, Pete was going to have the kids the following weekend. Hadn't actually sort of established it, but that would be the sort of the general flow of things. So I had something that I wanted to get to that weekend, so I texted him and asked whether I had a course that weekend and was he okay to have the kids. So he came back telling me that he was away for the weekend. And just listen to that, like, subtle bit of language, or maybe, sorry, if you're listening to it, you're like, Emma, that's not subtle at all. But for me, there's subtle language in there where I'm asking and he's telling, right? So I'm asking him whether it's okay for him to be in charge of the kids, and he's telling me that he's away that weekend. So the way that we sort of handle the kids is I'll always ask whether it's okay for him to have the kids. It's kind of getting onto the, I'm sure folk have seen the things going around on Facebook or Instagram where it's that whole thing of helping, your partner or your ex-partner or helping with the chores as opposed to being equally responsible with the chores. And this is language that I use with my kids, where I'll try so hard to avoid the, can you help me, blah blah blah, with we need to share things, guys, and can you be partly responsible for the laundry? Can you be partly responsible for, clearing the dishes after supper, whatever it is? There's this ongoing thing with the kid's dad and I over well, in my head, it's an ongoing thing over the language that gets used and where the responsibility lies and what's being taken. So, and then sitting beside that is my ability to set healthy boundaries over kids first, but also don't take advantage of me. So this thing happens, and I dealt with it at the time, and we just kind of moved on. But then I could just feel this resentment going. I'm like, oh, this is really annoying. No, he doesn't take responsibility. I'm always the one that blah 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 blah, and I'm building up. I wasn't even particularly verbalizing it, but it's all internal, and I'm just getting more and more wound up. There we go. I'm heading into resentment. So I was sitting meditating with that, and I don't know what whoever's watching what your beliefs are. When I sit and meditate, I'll often ask for guidance, and I am asking for guidance from higher power. I am, and some of you may be able to ask for guidance for your inner power, your inner strength, whatever works for you. But I will sit and meditate and ask for guidance, and through that process, I became aware that underlying this sort of more in the present moment, this is something that isn't right. And I do think that we should both take equal responsibility, so it should be both of us checking. So in the moment of that not actually being fair, I was latching onto, and here's the sort of Ronnie Corbett stories coming back round, old past resentment of not being seen, not being acknowledged, people not appreciating everything that I was doing. So in my childhood, it was all what I was doing for my mum or my brother or whoever, and now it's not being appreciated for everything that I'm holding for the kids. So this notion of having clean emotions in the moment. So I think I was right to pull the kid's dad up on that and sort of point out, look, this is equal responsibility. We're meant to be co-parenting. It's not, it's not a question of you helping me out. It's co-responsibility, equal responsibility. However, the way that I'd let that resentment build was because of my identification still with my own personal story of not being acknowledged, not being seen, things being unfair when I was a kid. So in terms of how you then get rid of these, I don't know if I'll ever get rid of things absolutely. But what I'm interested in doing is becoming more aware of what is happening now and what I'm allowing to affect from the past into what is happening now, if that makes sense. So I had that awareness of that whole situation, but it was an awareness that came very much after the event. It was then an awareness of, oh, okay, I am still holding this resentment, and then I had the choice to drop it or not. So it started a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't immediately clocking it, so it took me a bit of time. Now that I have raised my awareness of that and where that comes from, when that happens again, then perhaps I'll notice it more quickly. And it's not to say that I won't set the boundary in the moment and maybe have a very similar discussion, but I won't need to hold on to it for so long, eh? I'll be able to sort of look at it and go, I have a choice. I can keep this sort of identification that I have, and it might only be small and it might only come back every now and again, but it still does come back, that identification with the sort of the poor little me, chip on the shoulder me from childhood, and I can choose to follow that or not. So that's a very long explanation for Joy's question that she put in the comments for how you get rid of stuff. And again, it's like there's not a fix for this kind of stuff. There's not an easy sort of tick the box and then you're done. It's a journey. It's a journey of awareness. But hey, I'd rather be on this journey than not on it. Put it that way. Just before I came on to do this live, there was an Instagram post put up by Eckhart Tolle, which I thought was lovely and very sort of apropos of a lot of things that I do, that I'm sort of saying today and say much of the time. I love his book, The Power Now. If his book, The Power of Now. If you've not read his book, then really go and get it. It's a great book. So his post today was, do I want the present moment to be my friend or my enemy? The present moment is inseparable from life, so you are really deciding what kind of relationship you want to have with life. So for me, it's all about moving towards presence, moving towards living in your moment now, and whatever emotions are going on now, without and loosening off that identification with your personality stories from the past, whether that's your past childhood, your past teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, last week, whatever it is. So yeah, do you want the present moment to be your friend or your enemy? And I think you can make it more your friend by having a cleaner attitude towards it, by having it being present in the moment. Okay, that is me for today. I hope you have enjoyed this program. If there's anything that is resonating with you, or if there's anything that doesn't make sense at all, then do write something in the chat or get in touch with me. If you're listening on Open FM, thank you again for tuning in. If you're watching live, thank you for watching live. And if you're catching it on replay, would be delighted to hear from you in the chat. Just put #replay and put something in the chat, and I'll get back to you. So we're going to go live again next Monday. I've got a memorial that I'm heading down to for an uncle down south. So I shall see you all in 2 weeks' time, or listen to you all on the airwaves in 2 weeks' time. Okay, that's it. Emma Grant here from Heartfelt Change, signing out. Thank you for listening, and if you'd like to know anything more about what I'm doing, then head over to my website, www.heartfeltchange.co.uk. Okay, cheers for now.